Okay, these are the Punic Wars. Rome's Punic Wars. This defines what it is to be Roman. This is their greatest moment of trial and tribulation, and also their greatest moment of victory. The Punic Wars, dating from 264 to 146, so this is going to be over 100 years of warfare. It's actually a series of wars against the city of Carthage, their arch enemy Carthage. So the Carthaginians are Phoenician, and this is where the word Punic comes from. The word Punic is the Latin word for Phoenician. Just a reminder about these Phoenicians here. These were ancient traders. They traded all through the Mediterranean Sea and planting colonies. So the most important thing they do is to make money and facilitate trade, and they have a trading empire. And Carthage is one of their colonies. Where is Carthage? It's in North Africa, on the North African coast. Actually, the modern city of Tunis is nearby, as we'll see in the second. Carthage will be destroyed, but the modern city of Tunis is nearby, so it's the country of Tunisia, and it's directly south of Rome. Actually, 3 days by ship to get from Rome to Carthage or Carthage to Rome would have been just 3 days by ship, so it's actually very close to each other. They're in the same neighborhood, actually. And so in the 200s, they really begin to clash as Rome becomes not just a land power, but they take the entire peninsula, and the peninsula is surrounded by water, so Rome, by force, has to become a sea power, and that's where these two cities are going to clash, is over the Mediterranean Sea, and especially the area around Sicily. So as you see here on the map, Rome is extended to the peninsula, and Carthage is just right there, just right nearby. So there's Carthage, and there's Rome, 3 days by ship. And the first source of conflict is going to be over the island of Sicily. So the first phase of this war, the first war itself, is fought for about 20 years over the island of Sicily, caught in between these two growing powers. Rome actually had made an alliance. If you're looking for who's to blame here, the Romans will claim that the Carthaginians are to blame. That Rome had made an alliance with some Sicilians, and then they began to have battle with the Carthaginians, and Rome has to come to their aid. The problem with this whole thing is that Rome has no navy. Rome is a land power. And so how do you fight a naval war? If you're going to protect an island, you've got to have a navy. Well, the solution in Roman style is to learn and adopt and adapt. They learn from the Greeks. They will hire Greeks to teach them how do you fight at sea. And then they will copy. The story is that they actually captured a Carthaginian ship, or a Carthaginian ship washed ashore, and the Romans will be able to reverse engineer this, take the ship apart and see how it functions, and begin to build similar ships, copying the Carthaginian design. The Carthaginians have had thousands of years to work on their sea building, so they're the great naval power. And then Rome adapts. Once you have a ship and you're trying to sail it for war, they still have trouble. As this war goes on, the Romans still lack in naval skill. And so they try to adapt something. They try to adapt a way for their foot soldiers. The Romans are great on land. How can you use them in a naval battle? Well, the old way of waging war at sea was to ram people, and the Romans just can't get their ships to do this, but they get close, and so maybe there's some way we could get our soldiers from one ship onto the other ship, and these guys will be called Marines. It's the birth of the Marines. The way they do it, another adaptation, is through the corvus. They invent this on the front of the ship. You have a ram here. Well, here's a Roman invention. It's called a corvus, or a crow. And this is probably because it's got a spike on the end of it. And what this is a gangplank. And so you would lower this gangplank over to the other ship, and actually have a hook on the end of it, on the tip. And so you lower it over and hook them. Have a spike or a hook to hook the enemy ship. And now we just need to get close to somebody. We just need to get close enough to hook them. We don't need to worry about ramming. Just get close enough to hook them, drop this gangplank and hook them. And then our Marines on the front of the boat here, our Marines can cross this gangplank over to the other ship and make a naval battle into a land battle where the Romans can prosper. And again, this doesn't go easily. The Romans lose a lot of naval battles as they try to experiment, try to learn how to fight. But it does even the odds a little bit. And it's Carthage that is going to be exhausted first. Again, the Carthaginians are a country or an empire that is fighting for money. They're fighting for control of Sicily in order to make money off of it, whereas the Romans are fighting because they have to. They have to defend this ally. And so it's the Carthaginians who are going to break first. It's too expensive to fight this war. And also the Romans will eventually land an army in North Africa and threaten the city of Carthage. So that got their attention, and the citizens of Carthage will break and seek peace. This war becomes expensive to them. It's the Carthaginians who break first. And the treaty that comes down is that Sicily will be placed into the Roman sphere of influence as a Roman ally, and Carthage has to pay an indemnity. I just want to mention indemnities here because it's kind of important later on in history, and this is just part of warfare, that when you lose, you're accused of starting the war, you have to pay an indemnity. And this was a short war, so it's a pretty sizable indemnity. So now you have Italy and Sicily now. Sicily falls under Roman influence, and it doesn't stop there. The Romans just keep on going. And then they're successful. It turns out that once they get into naval warfare, they're starting to engage in protecting shipping and cutting down on pirates. They're very successful. And also managing harbors and managing trade. They're just good at it. There's something about the Romans that when they get involved in trade, they handle things really well. They build bridges, they build walls, they build roads, and now they build ships, and now they handle trade on the ocean. And they find that this is just going to be super valuable to them. And they continue to expand. They will next take Corsica, an island off the Italian coast, and then the island of Sardinia. And so these islands actually will flock to them as the Romans are the new tradesmen and the new protectors of the Mediterranean. And the money just becomes rolling in. The Romans thought they were doing well as bridge builders and charging tolls. Now they're handling harbors and trading fleets, and the money is great for them. The Second Punic War isn't far off. Carthage was humiliated in the first war, and they're ready for another war by 218. And this war will be relatively short, 17 years. But it's the advent of the great Carthaginian leader. The Carthage will have the great military commander, a guy named Hannibal, whom you'll find in history books of military events. His story is that his father had been humiliated in the first war. His father's name was Hamilcar Barca, and so this Barca family will swear revenge on Rome. Hamilcar Barca, a very valuable, very important Carthaginian who dominated over in Spain. This is his holdings of the Carthaginian empires in Spain, and he's famous for his mercenary army. Now we need to mention mercenaries here. Mercenaries are soldiers that you pay to fight. This has an advantage in the fact that you can pick and choose your soldiers. Has a disadvantage in that they fight for money. They have a lack of loyalty, and they also will leave if the money dries up. But Hannibal's army is a mercenary army created by his father. And the story is that as a boy he was sworn, and he's got brothers also. He and his brothers were sworn to destroy Rome in vengeance for their father. So the Second Punic War breaks out in 218, and the cause is that the Romans have continued to expand after Corsica and Sardinia. They began to plant colonies all the way over into France, through Italy over into France now, and they don't stop there. They'll continue over into Spain, and when you get into Spain, that's when the Barca family takes note that this must be stopped, and they will seek a reason for war. In 218, Hannibal will take his father's army and attack the Romans, absolutely massacring these colonies, destroying Roman colonies in Spain. And he doesn't stop there. Once he defeats the Romans, he's going to go for the throat. He's going to go for Rome itself. He leads his army from Spain up into France, Gaul, and then all the way into Italy. Hannibal. With his army, the accounts we have of this are Roman accounts. And so the Carthaginians don't write about this, but the Romans do. It's their defining event. And we get a lot of statistics here. Hannibal's army listed at about 40,000 men or mercenaries. And he also brings elephants with him, and the elephants become quite famous, although in military terms they're not that effective by this point, but still very famous that he had an army of elephants. They cross the Pyrenees Mountains into Gaul, and then they will also cross the Alps into Italy. Well, the Romans were ready for them. The Romans were ready for him to invade Italy, and so he actually sneaks around them. He will sneak through the Alps, through the St. Bernard Pass. This becomes quite a famous event that he snuck into Italy, got around the Romans, lost a few elephants in the mountains, but now he is across the Alps and into Italy itself. He is in the homeland of Italy, with his elephants. This becomes quite famous, that Hannibal and his elephants, whenever you see a picture of Hannibal, he's bound to be with his elephants. Through time, through the next 2,000 years, Hannibal and his elephants. Into Italy now, he's into northern Italy, and the Romans come out to meet him. They meet him at a place called the Trebbia River. These two armies line up in 218. 48,000 Carthaginians, his army is growing, versus 40,000 Romans on Roman turf. And the Romans come charging in to attack him, and Hannibal strikes them on the flank. He lures them into battle, and then as they come toward him, he has a small unit attack them on their flank. And that's all it takes, is just a small strike force on an enemy's flank to destroy the Roman army. Here's a diagram of it here. The Romans in camp, they wake up in the morning and come charging straight at Hannibal, who has a small unit that come attack the Romans from the rear and destroy them. The next battle is fought a little deeper in Italy. He's down near Rome now at the Battle of Lake Trasimene. The next year, 217, two Roman armies come at him. The problem with these two Roman armies is that they're led by consuls who do not get along. And he knew that. Hannibal knew that these two armies were not communicating. And so he appears to be caught in the middle of these two armies, and he will strike one of them. Since they're not coordinated, he will choose to strike one of them. And he will ambush it in a famous ambush along this lakefront here. One army coming from this direction, another army coming from this direction, and Hannibal in the middle chooses to ambush this army. He will hide his soldiers in this hilly area by the lake, and in the morning he knew that there was a mist, and this Roman army will be moving along this road in a morning mist, and Hannibal's army will come charging out of the woods and absolutely annihilate them, the destruction of another Roman army. So Hannibal must be listed among the great masters of war. If you list great military commanders, he's up there in the top 10, maybe even in the top 5 as a master of war. He motivates this army to do great things. Tactically, he beats the Romans at every turn. He's got their playbook. He knows exactly how the Romans fight. And then he matches them with the speed. He just can move his army super speeds and always surprising the Romans. Where he fails is in strategy. If he's looking to defeat Rome, he's messing with something here that he doesn't know much about. He knows how the Roman armies function, but he doesn't understand Roman society because they're never going to surrender to him, and he just doesn't understand this. Romans actually come up with a strategy now that they've been beaten in 2 battles and utterly humiliated. Do they send another army out as he's approaching Rome? And at this time, they have declared a dictatorship. In a time of emergency, Romans can declare a dictatorship. And in this case, they give it to a man named Fabius Maximus. And Fabius Maximus decrees that they will not fight him. They will not send their armies out to be annihilated by him. And instead, they choose a different strategy, to wait and exhaust him. His army of mercenaries have now entered Italy, and what are they going to do? They're going to rampage around, and we'll just wait for a moment to strike them, or wait and maybe they'll leave. This is called a Fabian strategy, when you have someone stronger than you, not to face them face to face. They'll just destroy you. So you try to pick your moment, pick your battles, and try to wear the enemy down. It's very effective. This strategy can be used by George Washington in the American Revolution, be used by the North Vietnamese against us in Vietnam. In other words, how long is the enemy going to fight if they're being worn down day by day? But the problem with this is, after Fabius's dictatorship is over, is that the Romans want to fight. They just can't stand sitting around not fighting him as he rampages through Italy. And so, as soon as they get a chance, they're going to send another army out after him. Hannibal at this time has moved into southern Italy. He's down around the ankle of Italy. And his army, reports are that his army is scattered out. His men are out looting, and they've become fat off their plundering. And so now is the time, the Romans declare, now is the time to strike him. They gather up a massive army, and maybe they can surprise him, march quickly down to the ankle of Italy and surprise him. They have 54,000. They've developed a huge Roman army, and they're coming after Hannibal, who's down to 45,000. His army seems to have disintegrated a little bit. And they catch him at a place called Cannae, this great battle of Cannae. The Roman army comes up in its perfect lines, and they begin to hit Hannibal's army that seems to be scattered, that seems to be unprepared. And the first opening part of the battle, Romans just destroy some of Hannibal's units. It's the Battle of Cannae in 216. It is considered the perfect battle. Not by the Romans, but by the Carthaginians. This is Hannibal's planned battle. He has baited this trap and watches it spring in. It's this perfect planned battle. He has deliberately set those weak units in the front to be destroyed, and then he has cavalry on his flanks where the Romans can't see them. And on his command, his army will reform its defenses to hold the Romans, and his cavalry and other units will come around and completely encircle the Romans. And of the 54,000 Romans, over 50,000 will be annihilated out in this one field at Cannae. So here's the closing of the trap as the Romans come deeper and deeper. His defenses form, and then his units will circle around and trap the Romans and annihilate them at the Battle of Cannae. So it's a great victory, great string of victories, but Hannibal is going to end up being a failure in all this. And the reason is he can't take Rome. His men were instructing him, now's the time to take Rome, and he just can't do it. He can't attack that city. And the reason is because of the walls. Rome has built these great walls around it, and Hannibal does not have the engineers. He doesn't have the siege equipment to actually attack the city of Rome. So he has to just attack everything they love, attack all of Italy. And he just doesn't understand this. He just doesn't understand why the Romans won't surrender. They will not surrender to him. He just never understands this. For 15 years, his armies will own Italy, except for the city of Rome. His armies will plunder